Hello, and welcome to Gittel Talks About Books. I'm Gittel Hesselberg, and today the book we're going to talk about is a lighthearted look at a serious subject. The book is The Last Voyage of Mrs. Henry Parker. It's a comedy. It's about a woman, Mrs. Henry Parker, Evelyn, and we meet her right at the beginning of the book as she's about to board the Golden Sunset cruise ship. It will be her 663rd cruise. She lives on board the cruise ship. And we get the first inkling of what she's like when she has trouble finding her cruise card. But she sees other people are wearing a thing around their neck. It has a name. What is it? Lantern? Halyard? Lanyard. And she eventually finds hers. And as we go through the book, we learn a lot about her. And we see the other people in her life. We see the ship's doctor, obviously, Dr. Hannah King. Sounds like Viking. And she meets two people on board ship, two fellow passengers, who become very close to her and watch out for her and sort of take care of her a little bit. There's a woman, she's very vivacious, bubbly, contagious almost, like Ebola, like fizzy, she's fizzy, like cola. Her name is Nola. And Nola's husband is Frank, like Ernest. So she remembers Fizzy Nola and Ernest Frank. We also meet the steward who takes care of her cabin, Grace, like Tuesday's Child. Tuesday's Child is full of Grace. This is how Evelyn remembers things, by association. Of course, she can't remember that Grace is her steward. She is constantly asking for Virgilio, her former steward, but he's now in Manila taking care of his mother. Evelyn's biggest problem is that she can't find her husband, Henry. Where is Henry? Through a series of flashbacks, we learn about her life. As a child, she lived in England. Her father was a French diplomat stationed in England. And when his term of service was over, he decided to stay in England. Her mother went back to Paris. Evelyn stayed with her father. As a young child, her father had taken her to see an exhibit about Florence Nightingale. At that moment, Evelyn decided to become a nurse, and become a nurse she did. She traveled to Australia, leaving England 1 week shy of her 21st birthday, and sailed there with the intention of becoming a nurse in Australia. Right at the beginning of her trip, she met the assistant ship surgeon, Dr. Henry Parker. He had ears that stuck out. He had perpetually smudged milk bottle glasses. He was kind of annoying. She wouldn't marry him even if he asked. 4 weeks later, when they arrived in Australia, Dr. Henry Parker had asked, and Evelyn accepted. As the wife of the ship's doctor, she traveled on board the ship with him. Life on board the ship wasn't all fun and games. She made friends, wives of other crew members. But as crews changed a lot, the friendships didn't last. And then there was tragedy. While on board the ship, she suffered a miscarriage. Her husband wasn't even on board at the time. He had left the ship with a passenger to escort him to the hospital in Panama. Had he been on board the ship, he wouldn't have been able to save the child. That tragic loss affected Evelyn, and she never really got over it. But as we see, now she is on her 663rd cruise, and we find out that it's her last cruise. When she realizes there's a farewell party, She believes that the cruise ship is going to be taken apart, made for scrap, whatever they do with old cruise ships. The truth is, it's not the cruise ship's last cruise. It's Evelyn's last cruise. She's going to be going ashore to live somewhere else. She's not really so clear about that. The things are fuzzy. Her biggest problem is she can't find Henry, her husband. He's missing. She goes all over the cruise ship. She goes to the casino. She goes to the club. She looks in the restaurant. She walks around the deck. She goes everywhere. And they keep missing each other. Or perhaps Henry's not even on the ship. Maybe he fell overboard. Maybe he died and she doesn't even remember. At one point, Nola has learned the truth and she's about to tell Evelyn the truth about Henry, but she doesn't get the chance. By the end of the book, we do learn the truth about Henry. It's somewhat of a surprising truth. And we see that Evelyn is going to live ashore at a retirement home for old seafarers. But what's the serious subject? Dementia. It's very clear to the reader, at least, almost from the beginning of the book, that Evelyn suffers from dementia, most probably brought on by a series of mini strokes. It's funny to laugh at her, at the mistakes she makes. She wakes up, thinks it's 8 o'clock in the evening, and she's waking up from a nap when it's really 8 o'clock in the morning. She puts on a dinner gown and a tiara to go to the dining room for dinner. Everyone else is dressed in casual clothes because it's really 8 in the morning and they're serving breakfast. She goes into the club. She knows what a club is. Her father used to go to a club, a place with dark walls and armchairs where men can smoke cigars and drink beer. And it turns out this is not what that kind of club is at all. Instead, there are young people dancing, if you want to call it that, and all kinds of crazy movements. Evelyn joins in. She goes into the casino. She's never been there before. She knows nothing about gambling. And suddenly the machine starts making lots of noise. She thinks she broke it and tries to get away as quickly as she can, not realizing she won the ship's jackpot. It's easy to laugh at her. It's not so easy to laugh when the person with dementia is your own relative. We see that Evelyn has people around her, not just Fizzy Nola and Ernest Frank, but she has a driver who takes care of her whenever they go for the turnaround back in port. The driver takes her to visit her solicitor, a man named Dobbs. He has a first name, Hubert, Horace. She thinks it starts with an H. She thinks he might be more than a solicitor to her, but she doesn't really know what. And her driver does tend to seem overly friendly. She doesn't exactly know why. By the end of the book, we find out Evelyn has a family. She doesn't even remember her family. But by the end of the book, we see that in this retirement home for old seafarers, Evelyn will live out the rest of her life. She will be well cared for, surrounded by people who love her. And that's the most we can hope for any of our loved ones, especially those who are with us only in body. And that is The Last Voyage of Mrs. Henry Parker. If you like this video, please like it, share it, and subscribe. I hope to be releasing 2 videos a week. We'll see how that goes. But for now, I'm Gittel saying goodbye and see you next time when we can talk about more books.